This video is going to be a one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what to look for at every single position on offense and on defense in Madden. And a lot of this stuff is going to transcend to different Maddens as well. Right now, we're an Ultimate Team. We're just in practice mode. So keep in mind, I am rocking a Lions theme team, but I'm going to go over the guidelines of what I want at every position, ability-wise, build-wise, all that good stuff. So first and foremost, when we talk about the quarterback spot, what are we looking at? Well, the quarterback spot is probably the most important thing on the field at all times, right? Because especially if you pass the ball, even if you pass the ball 50% of your plays, right? The quarterback's most important position on the field by far. Now, there are a lot of different quarterbacks who you can use at any given time, but you almost always want to be on or close to the cutting edge of them. And what I mean by that is that certain positions you can kind of get away with kind of, budget beasting your way through. Quarterback, when there's a new ability coming out for a quarterback, whether we unlock set feet lead, pass the elite for the first time, whether we unlock, gunslinger, whatever it is, you almost always want to be on that sort of just cutting edge style of it. His build doesn't matter a ton to me. The taller you can have, technically the better. And ideally he has a little bit of speed, but the number one thing I'm looking for is, one, can he make the throws? I.e., does he have set feet lead, pass the elite? Does he have gunslinger? And then if you can get Hot Route Master with that as well, that is super, super, super nice, okay? But that's the quarterback position, man, is so ability driven. Releases are important. I do think they're a little bit overrated, and a lot of people like to talk about releases to kind of sound like they're a try-hard when it's not as necessary as people. In certain Maddens, they're not as necessary. In this Madden that we're playing right now, Madden 24, there's no crazy send everybody blitzes that you need to get the ball off before they get to you. So the release isn't as important. Still is important, but just not as important. Now, the next position I want to talk about is the halfback spot. This can change quite a bit from Madden to Madden, but typically what I like is to have a halfback who is ideally a little bit taller, right? Above 6 foot. Obviously, I have Jahmyr Gibbs here, Lions theme team. He's not above 6 foot, but above 6 foot, but also somebody who can ideally juke a little bit. Someone who can get out in space, outrun people, make people miss in the open field. And then also, as a result of that, typically that means they're pretty good route runners. And the reason I say that is that when you're passing the ball at a pretty high clip, which I think is just the best way to play Madden, not even from me being a pass heavy guy, that's just how the best way to win games in Madden is. When you're passing the ball, your halfback getting involved in the passing game is one of the best things you can do. So you need someone who can run routes. The catching rating is a little bit overrated in my opinion. A lot of people look at that, and I just don't think it makes much of a difference, to be honest with you, in this game. But just kind of, take that for what you will. I really care a ton about him being able to juke and him being able to run routes. Those are the most important things by far. What is going on with the screen right now? What are we doing, man? You guys are watching a glitch right here. Dude, stop. EA. All right, I just restarted practice mode because of that. That was sick. Now, let's talk about the next thing. Let's skim through our offensive line really quickly here. There's a couple of little caveats you have to have for each individual scheme that you might run. But for the most part, dude, if you can get some heavy boys out there who are able to throw some blocks, I'm not even going to talk about thresholds or anything like that. Just some bigger dudes. I really do feel like when you have light guys on the offensive line, you tend to get pushed back a little bit more. And as a result of that, when you get pushed back, whether you just don't get that same push and run blocking, going forward, or what happens is the pocket collapses more on you. So I like some dudes who are a little bit heavy with high strength, and ideally, high pass and run blocking. Now, the next thing is, though, if you have a guy who pulls a lot, which different offenses you might, right? You want him to have good acceleration and ideally some good speed. That is really a big key with the offensive line. But besides that, man, that's really a place where I do think you can get away with skimping and it's not the worst place to skimp is what I'm kind of getting at here, right? With that being said, let's move over to one of the most important positions on the field, I believe, and that is the slot wide receiver spot. And the reason I say a slot wide receiver is so important is because in this case, right, we're in this random formation, the slot wide receiver is typically the guy who's going to be on various corner routes, various crossing routes, maybe he's on some drags. The slot wide receiver in Madden is incredibly useful and vital to an offense's success. So you want, typically, for me, I want my best player there almost always. And usually that player is going to be tall because you want to be able to highball him and you want him to run his on corner routes. You want him to get open. So taller guys are going to just do a better job of being able to get highballed on those and get above their man coverage, right? Get a step and get above them basically. And then two, just someone who's a good route runner, someone who's fast, all that good stuff. That is huge at the slot corner spot. I see some people use Tyreek Hill at the slot wide receiver spot. I said slot corner, but the slot wide receiver spot. And while like I get it because he's fast, I have my issues with it because he's so short that it can be tough. It can really, really be tough. That's why you see right here I have Megatron in the spot and Tyreek out wide a little bit further, just because I think that fits so much better, right? If we go to the outside wide receivers, these guys, you can skimp a little bit more on your outside guys. It's hard for me to say generalities for this because, you know, outside guys in each scheme can be a little bit different, and honestly, like, quite a bit different. But as kind of a rule of thumb, I do think you can get away with kind of cheating these guys out a little bit. They're usually on... It's hard, but a lot of times you'll find these guys on streaks more often than not, or just on, like, other various routes that aren't super hard to run, as opposed to slot wide receiver spots. So just keep that in mind. In general, wide receivers, I do try to go for height just because I think it helps you more often than it hurts you, I guess, as opposed to sacrificing it for like speed, if that makes sense. So it's kind of keep that in mind. Tight end, I like a dog at tight end. Very similar to running back is really important to have somebody who can run routes. Tight end is the same idea where you need someone who can run routes, who can do a good job and find ways to get open consistently. And ideally, if you can get tight end apprentice on him, that's huge. Tight end posts are huge. Tight end corner routes are huge. Tight ends are almost always huge focal points of offenses in Madden. So it's very similar to a halfback spot where like this dude is a difference maker. And very similar to real life where like you hear a lot of tight ends are like safety valves for offenses. It's very similar. Like tight ends are just so valuable in football. I don't care so much about the blocking traits on them or the blocking ratings, but if you are more of a runner or if you use your tight end in pass protection a lot, that might matter a little bit more. In Madden 22, there was a blitz that you had to block 6 people for, and I blocked my tight end every play. So I actually didn't care what his ratings were outside of Pass Pro. So keep that in mind, right? Like this guy right here, Sam Laporta. Ideally Sam Laporta would be a little bit taller. His speed's fine, but you know I'd like to see him be taller at my tight end spot. But he runs a pretty good post route. You see, like, dude, that's such a big deal. Now moving over to the defensive side of the ball, this is where a lot of schematics come in, right? And what I can say here is I'm gonna give you a couple generalities, but then we'll talk about more specifics. Is that if you have somebody who's blitzing or if you have somebody who's coming free unblocked a lot, whether it's a disengage or he's coming free up the A gap, the B gap, off the edge maybe, whatever it is, common sense says that 1, you want him to be fast, right? But then 2, you also need him to typically be a little bit smaller, and that's just going to give him a smaller like hitbox to get engaged in blocks. So keep that in mind, where these smaller guys can do a good job, right? If you have a blitz that gets defensive ends in free, right, let's say, then you want your defensive end to probably be a little bit smaller, depending, and definitely you want him to be fast, right? The faster he is, the better it's going to be. I've seen certain blitzes just straight up not work because they're just not fast enough, and the offensive line reacts to them too quickly, right? So keep that in mind. Now, if you are going for more of a shed-style defense, I am a big advocate for just speed in general at every position on defense, but especially in the shed defenses, speed can help a lot. But the most important thing is kind of their pass rushing moves, you know, the power move, their finesse move. One thing I never look at, and I mean, some of the nerds are going to get mad at me for this, but I have good run defense. You guys can see in all the videos we post on here. I don't care about block shed at all. I do not care about block shed rating at all. All block shed does is it helps with sheds on the run. And for the most part, you should be running run defenses that are getting dudes in free anyways. So block shedding, to me, it's just, it doesn't make enough of a difference anyways. It's, I don't know, I think it's a little bit talked about too much and hyped up too much. That's something that's very, very, very low on my list. And notice I haven't talked about traits really at all either. I think, man, for the majority of people who talk about traits and all that stuff, dude, they would be significantly better off spending all that time they're doing worried about traits focusing on getting better at passing the ball, or getting better at making adjustments on defense, or getting better at shooting gaps on run plays, stuff like that. All the trait talk, dude. The only trait I care about and I notice is actually at the quarterback spot, which is the senses pressure and forces throws. And you just want to avoid like where the one that's like he's paranoid or something like that, because I think that's what Cam Newton always has, and it sucks. It will force a lot of bad throws. So, but yeah, dude, a lot of that stuff is just ridiculously overrated, and I hate it because it doesn't teach good Madden. It's teaching, it's not teaching good Madden, right? So that was weird. Keep that in mind. Yeah, D-line though, looking for a lot of like power move and finesse move really is my main key things there. And then from there, you know, speed plays a big factor as well. Height will play some factor too, which is always nice. D tackle, I do love at D tackle, especially like a nose tackle, right? I love having a fat boy there. My favorite cards have been Aleem McNeil this year. Aleem McNeil's been an absolute dog. He's not a high overall, really. And then last year, Haloti Ngata was an absolute fucking beast. That dude was a tank. So do with that what you will, but I love that. Linebacker spot, I love subbing safeties in right there, and your linebackers are typically who you'll be using in some extent. So I love dudes who are just tall, fast, high change of direction, can, you know, the most athletic players you can get there, you want to get them there, right? Simple as that. Nothing more cute, nothing more, nothing more cute, nothing more anything else. You want dudes who are just absolute athletes at your linebacker spots, boys. Who's that? Is that Donald Penn? You want him at your linebacker spot, yeah. If you are blitzing a linebacker, though, you know, to keep into consideration, some of the stuff could potentially change a little bit on that. Now, slot corner, really just DBs in general. I'll talk about what different zones I want, or what different, like, things I want at different zones. I think that could be helpful. If you have a guy who's typically in a flat zone, I like him being tall. Him being tall, think about this. If a 5'8" dude is playing a 5-yard flat, they can't get above the 5-yard flat too much, right? But if a 6'8" dude is playing the 5-yard flat, well, they'll probably play the 10-yard flat too, kind of, right? You know what I'm saying? So flat zones, the taller they are, they're actually going to give them more range, which is really, really, really nice. And we just, you know, go from there. So that's a super, super nice thing. And it helps add a little bit layer of defense and a little bit layer of just, like, scaredness from offenses, because they have to worry about... Nice. That was a cool play. Or, yeah, offenses, because they have to worry about getting their corner routes now above the taller flat defenders. It can really throw a lot of people off and be a nice little, like, thing you could do. A lot of people, when we start getting flat zone defend or tall flat defenders, people throw a lot of picks. They do. It's because they're not used to it. They play just different routes, basically, which is always interesting. Deep zones kind of depends a little bit on what you're doing. I like these guys to be fast because I like to press my deep zones, so I need to get back as fast as possible. So that's a huge, huge deal, right? But after that, man, not a ton more, man. I'm not really looking at tackling. Notice I did talk a ton about ratings, and I just think, man, a lot of ratings get very, very overblown. And it's not to say that ratings aren't important. I don't want you thinking that's what I'm trying to say. But I think there's more important things we can focus on to become better Madden players than every little tiny rating or every little tiny this or that. Instead, if you focus on gameplay stuff, on how different things interact with each other from a pure gameplay perspective on the field, if you do that, you're going to make huge strides in your game. Way more than figuring out if you want high motor or not high motor, right? That difference might win you one game all year. But you learn how to freeform corner routes correctly, you'll win 20% more games just doing that, right? That's always a big, you know, advocate thing for me, because so many people ask me questions on Civil GG about, you know, different team building stuff, and it is important, but I'm always like, dude, I mean, the amount of questions we're asking here, man, if you spent all that time playing rep games, getting better at doing some, you know, learning the schemes, stuff like that, oh my goodness, man. I mean, you'd be dogging people, right? So I just want to keep that in mind, always keep that in perspective. The new player stuff is always, it's whatever. I rock this Lions theme team, and I don't lose any games because of the Lions theme team. If I do, I lose 0.001% of games because of the Lions theme team. But yeah, boys, you enjoyed that video, consider hitting the subscribe button. Trying to hit 20,000 subs on this channel. If you had any kind of value out of this as well, let me know. We can do more videos kind of like this. And yeah, talk to y'all in the next video.